Gene Hackman didn't depart in peace. Instead, he left behind a fortune capable of shaking an entire lineage. Over $80 million in cash, real estate, undisclosed stocks, and investments that no one dared mention. But behind those staggering figures was a nightmare, tearing apart every familial bond. Each dollar Hackman left behind didn't just buy mansions and million-dollar paintings. It also bought the darkest secrets, late-night calls, and desperate unsent letters. That money was rife with dread, betrayal, and dreams crushed before they could hatch. Gene Hackman didn't leave a legacy. He left a curse, once likened to an immortal monument of Hollywood, a place where faces that once stood under the spotlight are easily forgotten. Even the brightest stars eventually fade silently into the night sky. In his final years, Hackman chose an unusual path, completely different from the public's perception of a silver screen legend. No grand tribute parties, no tearful farewells before the cameras, no memoirs revealing final secrets. Gene Hackman left Hollywood in the most gentle and detached way. He vanished. New Mexico was no strange land to him, as he had purchased a home in Santa Fe in the 1980s, a place secluded and wild enough for him to escape the blinding glare of the movie capital. The winding red dirt roads, the dark pine forests, and the howling wind at dusk created a perfect setting for a star to close the final chapter of his life. Locals often whispered about the tall, thin, old man with a face etched with sharp wrinkles riding his bicycle along the small hills every day. "He looks like someone I've seen before," a grocery store clerk once said. But no one was sure. Gene Hackman almost dissolved into the air of this small town, becoming a faint shadow blending in with the elderly living out their final years in silence. Hollywood tried to lure him back. Offers from ambitious young directors, scripts written specifically for him. None could shake the wall of silence he had built around himself. "I've said everything I need to say," he once replied briefly. In a rare interview, at 90, Hackman was no longer interested in fame or fortune. The only thing he sought was peace, a luxury he had never had during his lifetime on film sets. But that silence wasn't entirely a choice. Rumors began to spread, and the darker aspects of Hackman's life gradually surfaced through whispered stories from insiders. It was said that his health was declining faster than anyone had predicted. Fleeting heart pains, unnoticed bicycle falls in the middle of the road. The Gene Hackman of his final years was a ghost of his former self. Hackman's family, according to unnamed sources, was not as harmonious as it appeared. He had 3 children from his first marriage to Faye Maltz, a 30-year marriage that ended in a bitter divorce. His daughter Elizabeth Hackman once publicly spoke about her father's cold detachment as fame devoured all the time he should have spent with his family. "He was always working, always somewhere else," she said in an interview. The relationship between Hackman and his children was never truly healthy. Although he provided well financially, family meals, teaching his children to ride bikes, or reading bedtime stories existed only in the imaginations of the Hackman children. The accumulated indifference over the years turned into an unbridgeable gap. Even when Hackman remarried Betsy Arakawa, a pianist 30 years his junior, the atmosphere between him and his children remained tense. Many close sources revealed that Gene Hackman's decision to live in seclusion was not merely for rest. It was also a way to escape the simmering conflicts within his own family. Family gatherings became rare. Phone calls grew shorter, and even Christmas was no longer an opportunity for reunion. Hackman never said it, but those close to him understood. He feared the disappointment in his children's eyes. He had tried to make amends with money, with assets, with lavish gifts sent from the West Coast to the cities where his children lived. But money, like the characters he once played, could not buy the most precious things: connection and forgiveness. That estrangement reached its peak when Hackman completely retired from Hollywood in 2004 after his final role in Welcome to Mooseport. No farewell to colleagues, no tribute party from the studios that once considered him a golden goose. Hackman vanished like a strange wind, leaving behind only vague rumors about a tragic, solitary, and stubborn end. In his final years, Monument Santa Fe in G. Hackman was like a vacuum, isolated from the world. He spent most of his time in a small wooden house, reading, writing, and painting landscapes. Those fortunate enough to encounter him at the local supermarket or gas station described him as a gaunt old man with deep-set eyes that still shone with unmistakable sharpness. It was said that Hackman liked to sit alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains red. Those were perhaps the rare moments he felt completely free. No camera flashes, no false praises, no troubled relationships to disturb him. Just him, the wind, and silent, unspoken thoughts. But more frightening were the rumors of a private fund, a shadow fund, that Hackman had established in the mid-90s. No one knew exactly how this fund operated, where the money came from, or its ultimate purpose. Among the discovered documents was a handwritten letter from Hackman to himself, like a financial diary. The letter stated, "I built this not to leave behind wealth, but to leave behind control." And that statement haunted his children, as it proved one thing: Gene Hackman never wanted his money to fall into anyone else's hands, not even his own family. As rumors about Hackman's health spread, Hollywood media began digging for the final clues about his life. Some said Hackman had secretly written a will years ago, carefully dividing his assets into various accounts, ensuring no one could contest them. Others claimed Hackman established an anonymous charity where he poured most of his fortune as a silent atonement to the children he had abandoned. The less he appeared, the more Hackman became the subject of countless conspiracy theories and fabricated stories. But in his small house in Santa Fe, he quietly passed his final days, leaving behind not just a brilliant career, but also mysteries that persisted even after his eyes closed. The only way to end a story is to disappear from it. Gene Hackman wrote his own ending by leaving the world in a way no one expected. The news of Gene Hackman's passing was announced on a grey morning before the sun had even peeked over the red peaks of New Mexico. The news was quiet and unheralded, much like his reclusive lifestyle for the last 2 decades. But as soon as that small piece of news quietly appeared in a local newspaper, it triggered an undertow, not only in Hollywood media, but within the Hackman family itself, where secret doors suddenly swung open after years of being sealed shut. The Hackman family never truly understood the extent of his wealth. With the image of a Hollywood legend who held 2 Oscar statuettes and graced the most prestigious red carpets, no one doubted that Hackman possessed a vast fortune. But exactly how large, where it was located, and how it was hidden were questions even his closest relatives couldn't answer. Gene Hackman's discretion and reclusiveness weren't just personality traits. They were an art, a strategy he executed flawlessly until his final moments. Initially, his family believed everything would be straightforward. An old handwritten will notarized from 2001 was found, listing a few obvious assets: the house in Santa Fe, a bank account in California, and a vintage Hudson Hornet that Hackman had kept since his youth. The total estimated value was less than $5 million, a paltry sum compared to his reputation and illustrious career. But the more they turned over old documents and delved into seemingly anonymous bank accounts, a completely different picture began to emerge. The name Gene Hackman, it turned out, didn't just exist in the world of cinema. Since the 1990s, at the height of his career, Hackman had begun quietly building a complex financial network, interwoven with real estate, stocks, anonymous investment, funds, and money discreetly transferred abroad. Hackman wasn't just a brilliant actor. He was a master of concealment in the financial world. The first to discover this lead was the family lawyer, an elderly man who had been with Hackman since the 70s. Amidst the dusty papers found in a wooden chest in the Santa Fe warehouse, handwritten letters and internal memos about a series of clandestine transactions were discovered. Investments in fledgling tech companies, suburban Nevada land funds, solar power plants in New Mexico, all registered under shell companies with no direct link to Hackman. But tracing the chain of transactions, each dollar led back to a single account, the original account Hackman established in 1993, right after winning his second Oscar. The assets, after piecing together all the clues, were estimated to exceed $80 million, a figure that shocked even his closest confidant. But what truly stunned the family wasn't the amount of money, but how Hackman had hidden it for all those years. No one knew exactly how he did it, with whom, or why he chose such secrecy in some mysterious transactions. Hackman even used aliases through trust accounts established in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore. The biggest question remained: why did Gene Hackman hide his fortune from his own family? Did he not trust them? Or were there deeper secrets yet to be revealed? A hypothesis began to circulate, not from the press, but within the Hackman family itself. The children, who grew up in the coldness of their famous father, now realized they had never truly understood him. Hackman wasn't just emotionally distant, he was financially distant, as if afraid that revealing a fraction of his wealth would drag his life into endless disputes. Therefore, he chose to erect walls, creating financial layers so impenetrable that even his own children couldn't reach them. The appearance of this mysterious fund immediately sparked clandestine investigations. Lawyers, financial experts, and even private detectives were hired to trace the fund, but all reached dead ends. Gene Hackman had prepared for this moment long ago. Phantom accounts, layers of shell companies, untraceable cash transactions. Every time the family took a step forward, Hackman seemed to have been a decade ahead. When the family lawyer released the official asset declaration, most of what was recorded was just the tip of the iceberg. The Santa Fe house, the vintage car, and a few bank deposits. The rest, the true fortune, still drifted somewhere in the financial shadows, known only to Hackman. And now that he was gone, that secret became an unsolvable puzzle for his closest relatives. It was in those frantic searches that the Hackman family realized a stark truth. There were moments when they never truly belonged in John Hackman's life. He lived like a solitary legend, loved money in his own way, hid it like a part of his soul, and took those secrets to his grave. That vast fortune, instead of becoming a family legacy, was now the wreckage of a man who chose to abandon everything, including his own family, to protect one thing: absolute control. The old wooden door of the Santa Fe house creaked dryly as it was opened. Dim yellow light streamed through the doorway, seeping into the dusty space, where the scent of decaying wood and old paper blended into the distinctive aroma of houses long devoid of human presence. The Hackman family stood silently before the scene, a frozen world where time had stopped long ago, leaving only shattered pieces of memory scattered across the grey wooden floor. They didn't cry immediately upon hearing of Hackman's passing. The loss was not simply the departure of a father, husband, or grandfather. It was like the aftershock of a subterranean earthquake that had been smouldering for years, now erupting, sweeping away everything from kinship and trust to long-buried secrets. That evening, gathered around the old wooden table, Gene Hackman's children opened each wooden box, each old envelope found in the corner of the warehouse. No one was prepared for what they were about to face. Inside those faded envelopes were not wills or financial instructions, as they had hoped, but handwritten letters never sent, with Hackman's familiar trembling script. The first letter was written in the winter of 1995, when Hackman had just finished filming Crimson Tide. He wrote to Christopher, his eldest son, whom Hackman hadn't spoken to directly for 15 years. The letter was short, just a few lines. No, I've never been the father you wanted me to be, but you have to understand. I was never meant to belong to anyone, not even my own family. Those words were like a cold knife slicing into Christopher's chest. He wasn't surprised to read them, but the pain of reading them from a yellowed piece of paper instead of hearing them directly from his father still took his breath away. The following letters were filled with memories and regrets. The one sent to Elizabeth, his youngest daughter, recounted evenings Hackman spent alone in the living room, watching old family tapes. Hackman wrote, "I always thought I was protecting you by keeping my distance. I wanted you to live without the shadow of my fame, but now I wonder,